It's the Scotty Myers Show.
Hey, welcome to this week's edition of the show. I'm your host, Scotty Myers. This week, very, very cool show. We've got a great guest, the legendary Lou Brutus. And if you're not familiar with his name, you are missing out. The guy is one of the best interviewers out there, legendary rock radio host. This guy has seen it all, done it all. And we kind of get into his book, Sonic Warrior, which chronicles his life a little bit and some of these crazy stories that when you read them, you're like, there's no way that is a real story. And then it turns out that it is 100% a real story, and just a super, super cool dude. So we're going to be talking to Lou Brutus in just a few minutes. But before we get into Lou and some of his crazy stories, and it's fun to just talk to like another radio guy. It was hard to not sink too deep into the radio minutia, and there's a lot of it. So we definitely could have done that. But before we get into to talking to Lou, definitely wanted to hit on the geek news of the week, because we got some cool news this week that we really have to break down. And this one kind of teeters on geek news and not so geeky news. But if you're a Disney geek, this is huge news. Mulan is headed to Disney Plus. Disney apparently could not wait any longer for COVID to clear up enough that theaters are going to be open and they're actually going to be able to release Mulan in theaters, which is a bummer because the trailers looked amazing. Like, it looks like a big screen movie. And, now it's coming home. And you're not going to have to wait long. It is going to hit Disney Plus on September 4th. Now, there is a little catch with this, though. It's not just flat out coming to Disney Plus and you're going to be able to log on and start streaming the movie. They are going to charge you for it. So it's kind of like a Disney Plus premium. It's going to cost $29.99 to watch Mulan, which at first sounds pricey, right? Why am I going to pay $30 to watch a movie? But if you think of, even if it was you and someone else going, that's $30. So the fact that the whole family can sit down and watch Mulan for $30, I think that's a pretty good deal. I think this is a really, really smart move for Disney. They're already ahead of their subscribers of where they wanted to be at this point with Disney Plus. And I think things like this are only going to drive more people to the streaming service. And of course, they make this announcement and Marvel fans start kind of knocking on Disney's door and going, hey, what the hell? What about Black Widow? Why don't we do the same thing with Black Widow? Throw it up on Disney Plus, charge us $30 and we'll see it. Disney's response to that was they see Mulan as a one-off, that they're going to do it this way with it. They're not saying this is going to be a new business model for them going forward. But I mean, at the same time, we have to start looking at some of these big movies that we're waiting for, theaters to kind of reopen and wonder how much longer do we want to wait? Do we want to wait? Potentially. I mean, who knows how quickly, maybe things could start to open up if the numbers start to trend the right way. But I mean, realistically, we're looking at probably, I'm going to say conservatively, another 3 to 4 months before things start to trend in the right direction. So when we start thinking about Black Widow, we start thinking about Wonder Woman, Tenet, we start thinking about all these big movies, and Warner has HBO Max that they could drop Wonder Woman on, or Tenet, and of course Disney has Disney Plus for Black Widow. Everybody has a streaming service now. So, how much longer do we wait? And how much longer can the studios wait? Because some of these movies like Black Widow and that, they're part of bigger stories. There's bigger franchises going along. So, I know everything's kind of been delayed a little bit, but I wouldn't be shocked. I know Warner Brothers has been pretty adamant about Tenet and Wonder Woman not going to a streaming service. Part of me would not be shocked if before the end of the year, if things don't go the right way, we're going to see both of those films hit streaming services. It just would not shock me. Also in Disney news and Marvel news, we actually got some Marvel news. I know, shocking. I thought they had kind of given up on sharing news with us. But Captain Marvel 2 has landed a director. Nia DaCosta is now your director for Captain Marvel 2. She is the director of the Candyman reboot / sequel, because it definitely looks like it references the older Candyman stories. But the trailers for that looked fantastic. So she is now going to be in the director's chair for Captain Marvel 2, which is good news there. And switching over to DC news. DC news getting a little lighter right now as we are basically just a couple of weeks and a couple of days away from DC fandom on August 22nd. But we maybe got a clue about Idris Elba's character for the Suicide Squad. The cast of the Suicide Squad got together and made a little, video to wish James Gunn a happy birthday. And everybody was kind of like, Margot Robbie did it in her Harley voice, and everybody seemed to be referencing a little bit their characters. And Idris Elba, when he did it, his was slowed way down, almost to a roar. In fact, at one point when we first see him, it sounds like a roar. So that's led many fans, myself included, to speculate that perhaps Idris Elba is playing Bronze Tiger in the Suicide Squad, which would be perfect. He's a great character. It fits with the little tip that we just got in this happy birthday video. If that is the case, maybe they're throwing us off, but I'd be down for that. As a guy that, had Suicide Squad issue number 1, and Bronze Tiger was a huge part of that team, I would be down with him being part of the squad this time around. And that's really all we've gotten from DC. Really, they gave us a new Suicide Squad logo in that little trailer as well. This time it's yellow with the red Suicide Squad logo. Looks very similar to the blue and yellow one that they released not too long ago. And that's kind of it. Like I said, it's going to be probably a little quiet on the DC front going forward, just because DC fandom is coming up. The only other bit of DC news is not great DC news. Harley Quinn, the animated show that is fantastic if you haven't checked it out, really well put together. They have moved season 1 and 2 of that to HBO Max as well. So it's on the DC Universe app, but now it's on HBO Max. And there's an article that came out that said pretty much everything on the DC Universe app, TV show wise, is also going to be heading over to HBO Max, which leads to the speculation that the DC Universe app is kind of on its last days, which is a bummer. It's a great app, and I'm all for this, the properties like Titans and Harley Quinn and all those things heading to HBO Max, but I don't see HBO Max offering us like the comic book access, maybe all the animated movies and shows that DC Universe is offering us. I still think there's a place for DC Universe as an app, but it seems like HBO Max is just going to kind of absorb most of it, and that will probably spell the end for the DC Universe app, unless they can come up with some other maybe comics only app that we can subscribe to. That would be pretty sweet as well. But if you're an HBO Max only subscriber, there's a lot of cool DC stuff headed your way. So keep your eyes open for that. So that will do it for your geek news. I'm on the road this week in one of the great rock cities of the world. I'm in Seattle, of course, birthplace of grunge, and being a rock and roll DJ, as I was in the past, and loving radio the way I do, a guy like Lou Brutus has been on my radar for a long, long time. A guy has interviewed a lot of the same people I have. Some of them, obviously, he has interviewed people I could only dream of interviewing, the likes of Frank Zappa and stuff like that. Lou is one of the rare guys in radio that has made such a career and has so many stories that even if you're not a huge radio person, if you are just a fan of music and great stories, then Lou Brutus's book, Sonic Warrior, is definitely something you're going to want to pick up and scroll through. It's a great read. I had a chance to catch up with Lou, talk to him a little bit about his radio career, where rock is today, some of the highlights that he's gone through over his radio career and his experiences in rock music. So here he is, the one and only Lou Brutus.
Your radio career started like as an intern, and it was kicked off with a bit of luck when I was reading a little bit about it. Was radio something you always aspired to get into, or was it really just that kind of dumb luck and fell into it?
No, I mean, I wanted to be on the radio going back to when I was a little kid. I grew up in central New Jersey in a little place called Englishtown, and it was kind of out in the sticks, but we were only an hour from both New York and Philadelphia, so we got media from both cities. So I was inundated at a young age with, the best radio personalities that the U.S. had to offer. And I really loved it, and I loved music, and I just thought, man, that's super cool. I would love to do that. And it was later that I lucked into an internship with WMMR in Philly, which was one of the original FM rock stations in the United States. And I believe the last of the originals that is still left. I went there a couple of years ago to Philly for the MMR 50th anniversary, which was a really awesome time. And, there were staff members like myself from throughout the half century. And some of the stories in the book actually go back to my times there, including there's a sort of a weird story. Well, they're all weird stories. But,
yeah, I was going to say.
One entitled "The Time Frank Zappa Made My Hawaiian Shirt Famous." And that grew out of some Halloween Zappaween parties that I helped put together for WMMR that Frank was nice enough to come in and be a part of. And that's how he and I struck up a friendship and stayed in touch until he passed away.
And that, I mean, I'm going to get into a little bit more later, but that's one of the amazing things about the book is not just, your life in radio and going to all these amazing festivals and shows. It's the relationships you built with some of these guys that seem otherworldly. And Zappa's a good example of that. Growing up when I did, it was kind of after Zappa, but he didn't seem like human to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think you could make a really good argument that Frank Zappa was the greatest musician of the 20th century. He was certainly one of the most important, and one that I think people will still be arguing about and trying to figure out long after the rest of us are dust. He was, he's probably the smartest guy I ever met. There was another fellow who's no longer with us that I was quite friendly with for a number of years by the name of Warren Zevon. And he was another really strange cat, but someone I think who had a mental capacity that was operating on several levels above my own, and so, well, this guy's a lot smarter than I am. And the same thing with Frank. He was something else. He knew I was a big fan, and, he didn't have a lot of supporters on the radio. So I think he appreciated that part of it. But he was just a good guy. He was strange and he had his way of doing things. And he certainly had a sarcastic wit about him, but I think he was a really awesome guy too.
He seems it in interviews when I see him talk. He seems very level-headed for a guy that's creating such madness, musically.
Yeah, I would highly recommend folks, after they buy my book, Sonic Warrior, they check out the real Frank Zappa book, which is his autobiography, and it's filled with insightful stuff and funny stuff. It's just one of the best books I've ever read. It's certainly one of the best music books I've ever read. And boy, oh boy, do I miss that guy. And the world could sure use Frank Zappa right now. We could use his wit and his intelligence more now than ever before.
And it would go nicely next to your book, because yours is a hell of a read as well. Do you remember, like you were talking about growing up in that area and being able to hear such amazing radio talent? Do you remember the moment that radio grabbed you? Because it gets its hooks in you when it, you know.
There were a couple times like that. I mean, I remember being probably 4, 5, 6 years old, and my mom would listen to WNEW AM, which was like, Sinatra and stuff like that. Although, this was the mid 60s. So, Sinatra and all these other artists like that, they were still contemporary artists. They were on the older side, but they were still having hit records. And I distinctly remember hearing, it's still maybe my favorite song of all time, That's Life by Frank Zappa by Frank Sinatra. Although Zappa would do a great job.
He would.
But hearing Sinatra on WNEW AM, and the morning guy was William B. Williams. And that was just one of the first people I kind of just stared at the radio, just trying to figure out, man, what is this all about? This seems like the coolest job in the world. And then when I got a little older and would start to listen to stuff on my own, there was a big AM top 40 station out of New York, WABC 77, WABC. And it had the greatest DJs I've ever heard, including, to this day, my favorite DJ of all time, Dan Ingram, who did the afternoon shift every day. And he was snarky before anybody knew what snark was. And there was a great word efficiency. The guys were just masters of the art of hosting music radio, filling in the blanks in between music. And that's really what I try and do. Like I've been offered talk show things, and I suppose I could do it. But it's not what I'm interested in. I like presenting music. I like talking about music. And, that's what these guys did so well. I mean, I just recently picked up some old air checks from some, website someplace that's got old recordings of radio stations from around the U.S. and around the world. And, I got it's a burned CD with a bunch of old Dan Ingram stuff from 1973 and 1980, and those were probably shows I listened to as a kid.
That's pretty sweet. Hopefully there's none of mine on there. I don't want that embarrassment. You were coming through when you got into radio, you kind of worked your way up through the ranks, and for a while you were a producer for John DeBella in Philly. At the same time we were doing a weekend show, but you were there for kind of the war with Stern a little bit.
Yeah, I was there for part of that. Part of the reason I left, first of all, I needed to go out and do my own thing. I after my internship at MMR, I left for about a year and was just visiting late one night after a Grateful Dead show. And John had been there about a year, and I just happened to be in the studio when he took a phone call. He hadn't even started his show yet. He was about half an hour away. He was just getting the studio set up. And his producer called in sick. And John turned to the DJ who was still on, Pierre Robert, who was still there at MMR, and said, "Oh, he called in sick again. I got to get rid of this guy and get a real producer." And I jumped up out of the chair. I said, "Hey, John, I'm Lou. I'm your new producer. When do I start?" And he laughed and took a drag off a cigarette and said, "You got balls, kid." He said, "Go sleep on it," because it was, I'd been there since like 2 a.m. He said, "Go sleep on the couch. I'll buy you breakfast when I get off the air at 10 o'clock, and we'll talk." And a week later, I moved to Philly and got the gig. And then soon after that, I started getting weekends and everything. I was working 7 days a week for about a year and a half without a day off. But anyway, yeah, so, then the Stern thing started to happen. It was time for me to leave anyway, but also I was turned off by the fact that, we were not fighting back, and that kind of bothered me because I was young and stupid, and I just wanted to get into a brawl, So from there, I went up and produced another show up in New York, but only did that for a few months. I got frustrated with it, and I just thought, well, I've got to do my own thing. So that's when I went out and got my own show.
Well, and that kind of answered it, because I was curious what it was like to be on the other side of that. I mean, we've all heard Howard's side of that war, and I guess there wouldn't be a side if you weren't fighting back.
Yeah, I mean, they just chose to. When I left, John was still had a pretty big lead. I think this is a long time ago. I don't, don't hold me to my memory of Nielsen ratings from, January of '88. But as I remember, John was still in the lead at that point. And now, of course, Howard eventually caught up and passed, and all sorts of crazy stuff happened. I do remember after I left the producing gig I was doing in New York, I went to Providence, Rhode Island to get my own show for the first time, the longtime rock station. It's still there, WHJY. And somebody called me. I want to say her name was, Dia. I won't say her last name in case I'm misremembering. But they tried they asked me if I was interested on going on Howard's show, because I think a lot of the people who had worked with John went on Howard's show, and I respectfully declined. I was a big fan of Howard Stern. I love Howard Stern, and certainly John could be a bit of a taskmaster. But John also gave me my start. He gave me my first paying gig in radio, so I would have been a disloyal piece of shit had I gone on Howard's show.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I had nothing to lose by going on Howard's show, but I just thought it would have been disrespectful of John and the fact he gave me my start, and also disrespectful of the other people who I had worked with at MMR who had also been instrumental in getting my career going. So, I just said, hey, thanks a lot. Really appreciate the offer, but probably not the right thing for me to do. So.
Well, and you say nothing to lose, but really, you don't know how a future PD might take that. You're applying for a job, and they're like, hey, you went and slanged some shit about John on Howard show, not very maybe. Yeah,
I had never thought of it that way. Yeah, I guess. But what it boiled down to was the right thing was to not go on, because it would have been, it would have been a classless move. Again, and that has nothing to do with Howard.
No.
That has everything to do with the people who gave me my start, and I owed a lot to,
Yeah, and we kind of talked about it or touched on it a bit earlier, but you're working at these stations, and MMR is one of the ones that's still around and still kicking, but we've lost a lot of them over the last few years, like BCN and some great rock stations.
And I worked at BCN part-time after Providence, and I did work for a brief time at WNEWAM, the station.
Oh, wow.
They wanted me to produce the morning show there, and I just didn't want to do it. And they said, well, we're really desperate. We need somebody in there. Can you just do it part-time for us as a favor? We'll pay you twice what the gig's worth, but can you do it until we find somebody full-time? Can you give us, 2 to 4 weeks or something? And I was like, sure. I think it was Ted Brown was doing the morning show, who had been another guy who'd been around for forever on New York radio. He was a real character, but it was fun. It was an interesting gig. And I did know some of the people on the FM side, WNEW-FM, which was WMMR's sister station. One of those folks I refer to in the book, legendary New York DJ Scott Muni at 102.7 WNEW-FM, where rock lives. And he was another one of my favorite. When I graduated from listening to AM to going to FM, Scott was he was a legend and a great talent and nice guy. I referred to him in the last chapter in the book, the time I rained vomit down on the largest concert event in history.
We're going to get to that story.
Yeah. Well, Scott Muni's in that, and I guess we can revisit Scott during that. But yeah. So anyway, to be in the same hallway with guys like that, always extremely exciting. And just a quick aside about Scott Muni. This is how cool and legendary Scott Muni was. I think it was for the Steel Wheels tour. The Rolling Stones, to announce the tour, had a press conference in Grand Central Station in New York. And, it's Bedlam, and the whole band is up on this stage they built in the middle of the train station, and there's commuters, and there's all this media, music media. And the Stones, they're the Stones. They could give a shit, so they're not really paying attention to the questions. And everybody, the journalists each got one question, and then maybe somebody would answer it, or they give a half-ass, they're kind of smoking cigarettes and having fun. Scott Muni stood up to ask a question. All of the Rolling Stones stood at attention. Hey, Scott, how you doing, man? Hey, all right, man, going out for a drink after a while. When all the Rolling Stones stop to tell you how cool you are, that's pretty good, So,
you're doing something right.
That's, I've been around rock stars and stuff, but boy, oh boy, the Rolling Stones don't all stop and stand at attention when I stand up. So, that's pretty impressive, even by my standards,
But yeah, so I mentioned some of those stations that we lost. Where do you see rock radio right now as a format?
I never know how to answer this stuff. I've never known how to answer this stuff. I said this to one of my neighbors today. He's a big fan of Seven Dust.
Okay.
And he was saying, I just don't understand why they're not bigger than they are. And I said, dude, the longer I'm in this business, the more I realize that I don't know shit. I have no idea why things work or why they don't. So, I don't know. Rock does not get its due respect quite a bit. And that and I mean that as a format and as a genre, and that spills over into the Grammy Awards and the national media. I don't know why. I think it's probably a variety of reasons. One thing that bugs me that I think doesn't help our cause in the rock genre is the minute somebody gets popular, everybody tries to tear them down, or I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people try to tear them down. I call it the Nickelback effect. Nickelback, they're a fine band. Maybe a little bit overproduced or maybe a little bit this or that, but, they're really good at what they do. Is it, and they've got some great songs. Is it fully my cup of tea? No, they're not one of my favorite bands, but I respect them. They're really good at what they do. Those guys, they got popular, and they had a couple, they've had several really big albums. They had a couple albums that were just huge, and immediately, fuck Nickelback. They suck. I hate fuck Nickelback. It's why would you even care? If you don't like them and you come by that opinion honestly, why would you spend so much time trying to tear them down?
Yeah. I mean, I was just going to say, we have radio stations that would brag about not playing them.
Yeah. It just became this, bagging on them became the thing to do. And it was in the pop world, when somebody blows up, what happens? All the other pop stars want to do a duet with them, and they all have a bunch of hits, and they all promote one another's stuff. And I realize there's beefs and there's feuds and shit in all formats. But, in the pop world and the hip hop world, there is a hell of a lot more cooperation over there than you ever see in rock. And again, I think there's a million other things that cause rock to be disrespected. But, when we eat our own, it's not going to help.
No, and obviously there's the phrase of rock is dead, which I 100% don't agree with. There's a shit ton of great bands out there. The only thing that I think maybe hurts rock a little bit right now is maybe it needs to get its edge back a little bit. I think about when I was a kid growing up and I would see Guns N' Roses on TV or Motley Crue on TV. I knew they were doing shit that I shouldn't do. You know what I mean? And and we kind of don't have that now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember, there were tours for Marilyn Manson or Ozzy where, the riot police would just show up because they just thought these people were godless, heathen, devil-worshipping, drug-smoking bastards, I also remember not quite straight-up rock, but attending the infamous Run DMC Beastie Boys tour. And this was I think the first big national tour for the Beastie Boys, and the cops made them move it to like 3:00 in the afternoon because they didn't want rap. They didn't want rap bands or rap rock at night because and I think they may have like called National Guard units out or something. I saw it at the Spectrum in Philly, one of my favorite venues, not there anymore. Best arena, that and Madison Square Garden, just two of the greatest indoor venues you could ever imagine. Saw countless shows at both venues, but yeah, that was crazy. And yeah, back to your original point. Yeah, it felt dangerous. It's like, man, am I going to get shot at this thing, or am I going to get knifed, or well, hell, I'm going. Sounds like fun.
Well, as great as Dave Grohl is, he's too nice. It's like. Well,
but that's Dave Grohl. It's Dave Grohl, who, as you know, there's a chapter in the book on him. It's probably the shortest chapter and the nicest chapter, just about how cool Dave Grohl is, from a couple of firsthand things from me. And they're nothing really huge or crazy. They're just a couple of good examples of how this guy, who's one of the biggest rock stars on the planet, been one of the most down-to-earth people I've dealt with when I've worked with him, which is just for radio interviews and stuff. I mean, there are plenty of bands that I know pretty well and I've traveled with and stuff. Dave's not one. But again, it's all in the book. I mean, I lay everything out as honestly as I can.
Yeah, I mean, just the last little thing on the edginess, it just kind of crossed my mind a little bit, is I think the people leading kind of the edginess in rock right now are the females, like Lizzie of Hailstorm and Taylor Momsen, and they're kind of throwing their lives out there a little bit and making themselves a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, well, and if you want, more danger, check out somebody like OTEP. She is extremely political. She is extremely opinionated. She's a fucking brave woman. I quite like her a lot. She's had an uphill battle getting on, mainstream radio, but she's got some great songs and she's got a lot to say. And again, I don't agree with everything she says, but I'm glad she's out there saying it. I'm appreciative of anybody who wants to put their balls or their ovaries, however it goes, on the line.
Yeah.
And I definitely do not agree with people who oh, you're a rock star, shut up and play your songs. Well, anybody is allowed to state their opinion. A rock star shouldn't have less chance to state their opinion than a plumber or an electrician or a doctor or an actor or anybody else. Everybody has a right to state their opinion. If you think they're full of shit, then that's your right, But I really resent it when people say, shut up and do your job. Nobody cares what you think. Well, okay. Nobody cares what you think either then.
Yeah. There's no, hey, you're an accountant, shut up and do math.
Yeah, that's just, no, but that's exactly it,
Yeah.
And if somebody has taken a career path and worked really hard, that they have a platform that, they have access to more people, well, they got it on their own. Fuck you.
Now, the book, Sonic Warrior, as we've talked about a little bit, it's a collection of stories that seem too crazy to be true. And I know you're a fan of Hunter S. Thompson. You share that with Corey Taylor. Do you feel you were channeling him a bit on this? Because it has a bit of that Hunter Gonzo vibe.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I've never written a book before, so I only, I mean, the way I wrote the book is essentially just me telling the stories out loud and how I've told the story since, whatever the event was that took place. Certainly in the Hunter Thompson chapter, there are passages and phrases that I purposely made Thompson-esque. And,
okay.
and that is certainly for that chapter. But the rest of it is just, I think how I tell the stories, one of the nicer things that I've heard back, from people who have read the book is oh, this is just like how you tell the story, or I could hear your voice in my head. This is exactly how I would imagine you would tell the story. And that's exactly, what I was looking for. And again, I don't know how to write any other way. I just, just know how to say it out loud and then sort of dictate to myself, and then, I would add some levels of polish, I guess, or what passes for me for polish. I mean, I just did the best I could. I mean, there was nobody else there with me. It was just me sitting at my iMac, kind of banging it out over the course of 4 or 5 years when I had time.
And we kind of hit on one of the kind of more infamous stories a little earlier, you throwing up on, the biggest concert of all time, and not throwing up throwing up on.
I threw up on the crowd, yeah.
Do you want to divulge that one?
Yeah. Well, and again, the full title of the book is Sonic Warrior, My Life as a Rock and Roll Reprobate, Tales of Sex, Drugs, and Vomiting at Inopportune Moments. And actually, the stories that bookend the book, the first story and the last story, are in fact vomiting stories. The opening chapter is the time I attended my first concert and threw up on Carlos Sanchez. And that's about going to see Black Sabbath and Ted Nugent at Madison Square Garden, December of 76. I had the flu. I still went. And in the excitement of waiting for Black Sabbath to hit and Ted Nugent coming off stage, I thought it would be a really good idea to down an entire bottle of Boone's Farm strawberry wine in one throw. Bad idea. Passed out, missed Black Sabbath, vomited all over Madison Square Garden, including my sister's boyfriend, Carlos, who, by the way, when I've done some of the readings online, since I can't do the book tour because of the pandemic, Carlos has shown up to some of those. And that's the beautiful thing about so much, really everything in the book. Like, some of it sounds crazy, but there are people there for all of this shit. They, they've all pretty much reached out to me through this, and some of them have taken part in some of the talks and the chats. Anyway, the last chapter, the time I threw rain vomit down on the largest concert event in history, is about Live Aid. And by the way, the chapters do not go in any order of any kind. It just skips around as if we were at the bar and I was telling stories. But I was working at WMMR, and I had been a professional radio person for like a year and a half, and I'm, I don't know, 20 or so. And since I was the youngest and stupidest on the staff, I was the one they made go up in the helicopter early in the day. And I did a couple of runs in a glass-nose helicopter over Live Aid. It was on the first one that I started puking on the inside of the helicopter, which I can tell you officially, helicopter pilots don't like it when you puke on the inside of their helicopter. So he makes me shove my mouth out. There's like a little sliding window, and I shove my face through it, and I start vomiting, and the vomit gets caught up by the rotors. So I think it fell as a fine mist on the heat and humidity strapped concert goers below. There, we're right above the stadium, and there's, I don't know, 100 and 110,000 people there, quite a day. And then, then I landed, went to the concert, and did backstage coverage, and interviewed a number of artists. Carlos Santana was one of the first big interviews I got to do, and the first one I did that day. And an old friend of mine, she's still in Philadelphia radio, great woman. I adore her. Her name is Cindy Drew. She had a camera backstage, and she got a picture of me following Carlos Santana to a trailer to go do the interview. I think she got another picture that, I don't remember if she got it or somebody else, of Pierre Robert and I backstage late in the day, although the sun was still up. But it was just as exciting a day as you could imagine, and it went worldwide. And the only thing I remember stopping for was to watch Freddie Mercury on television. Queen was performing at the British half of Live Aid at Wembley, and everybody stopped in their tracks to crowd around. There were banks of televisions backstage, and I just remember, fuck, Freddie Mercury, Queen, oh my God. And Freddie was the one guy I never got to see. had tickets twice, and I had the flu both times. And they were such tour monsters. I thought, well, it's Queen. They're around every 3 months. I'll get to see Queen. And I never got another chance.
That's brutal. I've had a couple bands like that now that I was like, I'll get them eventually, and then not going to happen.
Yeah, that's why I tell my listeners all the time, never miss an opportunity to see an artist. You never know when it will be your last. I've taken it to heart for the most part myself. I think I learned the lesson hard because of Freddie Mercury. But I remember passing up on going to see Temple of the Dog. And I thought, well, I know they're going to add on some more shows, and they're going to do this again. And, I think the closest they came to me, they were playing the Tower Theater up in Philly, another phenomenal venue that's still there. And I just thought, I'm not going to schlep up. I'll wait till they come closer. Man, I'm not going all the way. And, Chris Cornell is gone now. So, and there's a guy that I saw with Audio Slave, and I saw him do solo work, and I saw him with Soundgarden countless times, interviewed him many, many times. Nice guy, but he's gone. So, you just got to go when you can.
Yeah, you can't. You got to take your shots. You can't count on another pitch.
Always. And what else? What's better than going to see somebody in concert? What else are you going to do that night? Watch fucking Netflix? Go to the show. Go to the live show. At least when the live shows return.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's going to be it's going to be such a release, that first one, when we can go back.
Yeah, everyone's, or I shouldn't say everyone, but folks are hoping for next year, and I hope that turns out to be okay. But I know some people who are very much of the mind that things aren't really going to start to get better till 2022. I don't know if things are going to stay worse in the United States. Some other places seem to have gotten a better handle on things. I know Metallica is still on the books for Brazil in December with Greta Van Fleet opening, but I know they're having a bad time down in Brazil. So, everybody is just playing this thing by ear, myself included. I thought I would have done a couple of dozen book tour dates by now. But, if the biggest problem I have to deal with in this pandemic is that my book tour gets pushed back a year or so, I'll consider myself a lucky guy.
Yeah, honestly. And you mentioned some of the interviews there, and you've talked to everybody pretty much. I can't think of somebody that, really maybe you didn't get to talk to. And I was thinking, what sticks out in your mind when you think of your interviews? Maybe not your best ones, but maybe ones that you're most proud of.
Oh, boy, that's a good question. Proud of any. Boy, it's such a tough question. Well, to refer back to Zappa and Zevon, my interviews with them always sucked. They were just the worst, because off the air, those guys were great to talk to. On the air, Warren would purposely clam up just to watch you sweat. I think he was a twisted dude. I think on some level, he liked making you uncomfortable and just making you work for it and just busting your balls. I think that's part of what he was doing. He had a depraved sense of humor, and I mean that as a compliment. Excuse me, but boy, the second you crack the mic, it was just like pulling teeth. I did a live television spot with him once.
Oh, God.
And he just gave me yes and no answers, and I was just like, the flop sweat was pouring down my forehead. So yeah, that didn't really work out. And Frank just answered everything so literally, just because some people, you get a back and forth going with, and it gets friendly, and you kind of surf the conversation like that. But Frank, and Warren too, I was so in awe of those guys, even after I'd gotten to know them, that I don't think I could clear-headedly do a good interview. Kind of like, meeting a girl that like you're totally head over heels in love with. So you forget how to be cool. You forget how to act. You just turn into a dope. I think if you're too much of a fan of somebody, it can really sort of fuck you up for that. On the flip side of the coin, there's so many cool people I've met who are really well spoken, who are just really great conversationalists. Corey Taylor, who wrote the foreword for the book, he's just a funny fucking guy.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
He's incredibly smart. He's outspoken. He's well spoken. Conversations with him are always a joy. Johannes Eckerstrom from Avatar is another super smart individual and somebody I love to speak to. God almighty, there's so many others to mention. There are so many interesting people that I've gotten to meet. And that's one of the great things about the job. And one of the first things I always mention to people, I get to meet and be around interesting, creative people. And boy, oh boy, that's just one of the great blessings in life.
It was one of my favorite parts of the radio job. Like Corey, you mentioned, I had him on a couple times and always so much fun. And yeah, it was like whenever anybody asked me what I missed most, I try to book them on the podcast, but it's tougher. So,
yeah.
It's like I miss just having that access.
Yeah, it's just, I've been fortunate because I've been doing the radio thing for so long. My syndicated show, Hard Drive, the weekend edition, we've been doing that for over 24 years now. And the weeknight edition, I think that's like 10 or 12 years.
Oh, wow.
So, I've got relationships with all these folks, and I've had relationships with them since they were baby bands, and a lot of them before they were signed, or, in many, 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 many cases, I was the first airplay that they got. So, not everybody remembers you, but most everybody still treats you good, and I try and keep on an even keel with everybody, so.
Yeah, and you mentioned that like you become kind of friendly with a lot of them. Did any of them ask you to leave a story out of the book?
No, but
I was gonna say that sounds like a no yes.
This is how a number of the conversations went, more or less. Hey Lou, hey man, hey, I hear you're writing a book. Yeah, it's going to be out next year. Yeah, what kind of stories are you putting in the book? Just some of the crazy shit I've seen. Like, would there be stories about insert embarrassing thing here, or drug-related thing here, or reason wife would divorce the person here? And I'm like, nah, there's nothing like that in the book. It's like, oh, fucking great. Can't wait to read your book. Do you need a quote for it or something? So, I've been upfront when I talk about the book. As crazy as so much of it is, and there's a chapter in the book, the time our tour bus ran over a guy on the New Jersey Turnpike. There's fucked up stuff in the book, but I didn't want to write a book that would hurt other people.
Right.
Like, I saw plenty of people do drugs and do crazy shit. And maybe the book would sell more copies if I put that stuff in, but I didn't want to be an asshole to people, and many people that I quite liked, or there was no reason for it. The book didn't need it. The book, I think, is howlingly funny and entertaining and insightful into the music world enough that I didn't need to shit on other people. I wouldn't want to do it. For the same reason. Yeah, I could have gone on Howard Stern's show and talked bad about people I worked with, but that's not the kind of person I want to be.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to play it. Especially if you don't need it, don't use it. That's just not me.
As I said, you got to grab his book. If you're looking for some really cool reading as we wind down summer, maybe you've already gone through some of your summer reading list and you're looking for something new, grab Sonic Warrior. You're definitely going to dig all the stories in there, whether you're a radio fan, a rock fan, or just a fan of crazy, outlandish shit. There's something in there for absolutely everybody. That pretty much does it for this week's edition of the show. I want to thank you so much for having a listen and spreading the word. We popped up in a couple of new places yet again. Absolutely love when I see that. When I check the stats and I see new countries lit up, it definitely charges me up. So keep sharing the words on the show. Keep subscribing. Keep liking it. Keep commenting. All the fun stuff that you guys are doing. I can't thank you enough for making this little piece of audio part of your life. So thank you. And until we chat again, have a great week.